The gym smelled of iron and chlorine the night I came back. I stood in the doorway, my reflection caught in the glass, my chest tightening with a weight heavier than hunger, heavier than shame. 6 months earlier, I was parked outside that same building, 2 kids asleep in the back seat of my car. I thought the owner would call the cops when he found us sneaking into the restroom, but instead, he pressed a key into my hand. Use the showers, the Wi-Fi, whatever you need, no questions. It should have been salvation. It should have felt like kindness. But standing there now, the job secured, the apartment leased, the illusion of stability rebuilt brick by fragile brick, I couldn't ignore the way he looked at me when I approached his office. His eyes didn't hold charity. They held recognition, knowledge, something I hadn't given him. I walked in to thank him, and that's when everything shifted. His office was dim, a single lamp throwing shadows across paperwork stacked with surgical precision. He smiled when I entered, but it wasn't warmth, it was possession. "I knew you'd come back," he said. The words sat between us like a trap. My breath tightened. I forced a thank you, forced gratitude. He waved it away like a man brushing crumbs from his table. "You don't owe me anything," he added. Then, after a pause that dragged too long, "unless you want to." Something cracked inside me. The key, the open door, the whispered "no questions." They weren't charity, they were investment. For weeks I had thought of him as savior, but now, in the quiet hum of his office, I realized I'd been bought. Not openly, not crudely, but deliberately. He knew my children's faces. He knew the nights I carried them, wet-haired, out of the showers he'd unlocked. He knew how desperate I was not to lose them, and desperation, I understood too late, was currency. I didn't react, not outwardly. I nodded, thanked him again, left the office with the same calm mask I wore when I bagged groceries for strangers. But inside, my thoughts spiraled. What exactly did he want? A favor? Loyalty? Silence? Something darker? I tested the edges quietly. I searched records, business filings, court dockets, tax liens. The gym wasn't just a gym, it was a shell. Funds moving through accounts, names repeating in strange places. I checked his social media. Empty. Too empty, as though scrubbed. I drove by late at night, watching who entered, who left. Not athletes, not families. Men in suits, quick glances over shoulders, briefcases clutched tight. The kindness wasn't kindness, it was leverage, and I was tangled in it. My kids still laughed in the apartment, still asked when we could go back to the pool, but every time I heard them, I thought of that key, that office, that look. And the longer I watched, the more certain I became, whatever he'd built was rotting underneath. The truth arrived like a knife sliding under skin. Court filings. Hidden, but not hidden enough. A sealed indictment. Fraud, laundering, trafficking through subsidiaries linked to his gym. Witness lists marked confidential. And there, buried in the documents, my name. Not as target, not as suspect. As character witness. He had written me into his defense before I even walked back into his office. The homeless mother he saved. The human shield to hold up in court. That was his investment, not my survival, not my kids, my silence, my testimony. I read the pages until my hands shook. Then I stopped shaking. Because shaking was weakness. I folded the papers neatly, prepared myself. When I returned to his office, I said only one thing. "You planned this." He froze, smiled thinly. "You misunderstand." But I didn't, not anymore. The following week, I stood in the same office again, but this time, I wasn't alone. 2 men entered behind me, badges flashing briefly before disappearing into jackets. Federal, quiet, efficient. His eyes widened as they stepped forward. I set the folder on his desk. He reached for words, for denial, for control, but none came. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't gloat, I simply leaned close enough for him to hear me over the sound of his life collapsing. "You thought you bought me," I whispered, "but I was never yours." His mouth opened, but the agents closed in, hands on his arms, steel in their grip. And for the first time, he looked powerless. Afterward, I sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, the city lights bleeding into the windshield. My children were asleep in the back seat, just as they had been the night this began. I should have felt guilt. I should have felt fear. Instead, I felt nothing. He had tried to turn my desperation into chains. He had mistaken survival for loyalty. He had written my life into his defense like a pawn he could move at will. But pawns, when cornered, can still cut sideways. The key he gave me still hung on my chain, rusted, cold. I turned it in my hand one last time. Then I let it fall into the gutter. And as the rain carried it away, I realized the truth that settled like iron in my chest. I was never his charity. I was his undoing.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. Subscribe now to Cheating Stories Insight World for more amazing stories.